How many people get impacted when people drive on the road under influence? Does it affect many? And the answer is, of course, yes. And I want to read you a statistic from the CDC. It says in 2011, it was reported that an average driver under the influence drives 80 times before their first arrest. 99% of those under the influence walk away. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says that every day 28 people die as a result of drivers under the influence, and every 2 minutes someone gets injured. Those are staggering numbers, and for many people those numbers become a reality when it impacts them. With me is Wendy Reynolds. She is a Superior Court judge. She is an attorney. She does estate planning, and she's a speaker as well. And when you hear her story, you understand how she got where she's at today. At the age of 5, she got hit by a driver under the influence while she was in the car with her family. There was no remorse. How do you overcome the impossible? Wendy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Wendy, you got hit by, you collided in a car crash. Tell me what happened.
Well, basically a driver under the influence slammed head on into us. He'd crossed over the center divider, and my father didn't have time to get out of the way. And basically the first responder on the scene, noticed that there was an odor of alcohol coming from the pickup truck. He went and checked on my mom and my dad, and they were actually high school friends of his, so he was very impacted by that.
How old were they?
They were 25 and 26 years old when they were killed.
Who were in the car?
Also myself, I had just turned 5 years old, and my sister, who was 14 months old. And the deputy sheriff, who I met actually 2 years ago at my grandmother's funeral, told me that he saw my baby sister in the back seat, and he thought she was just sleeping until he actually tried to take her pulse, and her neck fell over because she had a broken neck.
Wow, wow. So he's at the scene. Small town, everybody knows everybody.
Yes.
I'm sure he was crying, having to deal with that, made a huge impact. Then normal things, what usually happen is, the tow truck is ready to pull this. What did the car look like?
I don't remember, but I guess there's a picture of it. It was completely smashed in. It looks like basically the front of the car, especially on my mom's side, got most of the brunt of the collision. They didn't actually know I was in the car, and the deputy sheriff who was there didn't actually know that my parents had 2 children. So it just so happened they didn't even know I was in the car. So a neighbor of our family stopped at the scene and was trying to help. And he noticed, my mom, my dad, and my sister there, but he asked where I was. And the firemen and the medics and everybody said, no, there's nobody else in the car. And there's the car on the tow truck. And so the car was being towed away when this neighbor stopped and basically said, no, they have another daughter. She's got to be with them. She's always with them. And he went back and forth with them. And finally, I guess in order to appease this neighbor, the fireman said, fine, we'll take the car back and we'll take it apart piece by piece.
And they were ready to go home at that point.
They were done.
I'm sure.
Yeah, they were really done.
Right.
And it was very traumatic. I mean, it's a whole family that's crushed. But they ended up finding me. I had slid under the front seat of the car, and then the front of the car had come over the top of me. So it wasn't just, I was under.
So you're under like 2,000 pounds of metal?
Pretty much.
So they start cutting the car. They have to be careful cutting this apart. They don't think you're in there.
Yeah, they don't think anybody's in there, and they didn't know where I was. So they were just sawing things and taking things apart.
Wow, wow. So they finally get to you. What were you looking like at that moment?
From what I've heard, I was completely blue because I wasn't breathing. I had punctured my lungs. I had several broken ribs inside, and severe internal bleeding, and I was completely crushed, and my head was gouged, and I had.
You have a broken jaw too?
I had a broken jaw. I had my teeth wired shut for months. I have a big gash. Actually, almost took my eye out right here, and so when they found me, they didn't really think I was going to make it, and I did.
Wow! Wow! So you're out there. They take you in the hospital. You need surgery. You're not probably too weak. They're like, we can't.
Right.
We're just going to see if she survives, if it's worth our surgery.
Well,
they
didn't even operate on me until like 5 days later because I didn't think I was going to make it through the weekend. The doctors and nurses basically were telling my aunts and uncles and my grandparents prepare for the worst because we don't think she's going to make it. And I was very unstable, and plus my lungs kept deflating. So every time they'd rush me in, they'd get my lungs working again, and then they'd just stop working. And so it was like this big fight, and yeah, I'm not supposed to be here.
So you're an orphan at the age of 5.
Yes.
And by the time you probably go into shock, all this reality sets in. Did your parents have a will? What was going to happen with you?
They did not, because they were so young. They didn't think they were going to die. In fact, most people don't believe they're going to die, but it does happen to everyone at some point.
Yeah.
They did not have a will. They didn't have anything written down like who I was going to live with. So there was this big custody battle of me while I was in the hospital fighting for my life. I didn't have anywhere else to go when I got out. I became a ward of the court, basically. And so basically my grandparents on my maternal side, my mom's mom and dad versus my aunt and uncle, and my mom's mom and dad won. The judge basically picked who was going to raise me.
What did that do to the family?
Ripped us apart. I was the only thing left of my dad, and I was the only thing left of my mom, and so it was hard for both sides of my family to come together and be okay. They just, every birthday was very hard. One side of the family sat there, one side sat there, and so that's kind of why I do estate planning now, so that people will be prepared and they have their things together for their kids.
And I am one of those bad ones. I'll be meeting with you.
I know, we already talked about that.
I'm going to meet with you. So, but real quick, did you ever think, why me? Why am I alive?
Every day of my life, especially when I was growing up. It was very hard being raised by people who were a generation, 2 generations above me, and they were older. They did the best they could, but really, they had just buried their son and daughter and granddaughter. It was really hard for them. And, now being a parent myself, I look back and I think, I don't know how they went through this, but my grandmother said the only reason that she got up in the morning was because she had to take care of me. Wow. So she said I kind of saved her life by staying alive.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to this, of course, because I want to know what happened to the guy that was under the influence. Okay. But before we do that, stay tuned. You want to hear this, because it's not just that. How do you forgive and move on when they take everything away from you? We'll be right back.
Barb TV is building on a fantastic community of followers who love the show. Follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Barb TV.
In 2013, 10,076 people died because of getting in car crashes and accidents of people that were driving under the influence. That is a lot of people. But there has been some positive that has happened over the years, and that is when Matt started. And Matt has made a difference and really reduced some numbers. Wendy, tell me a little bit, what is Matt all about?
Well, I believe it was started by a woman who had lost her daughter because of a driver under the influence of either alcohol or drugs. She started it as a nonprofit, and there are Mothers Against Drunk Driving speakers all over the nation. They have victim impact panels where victims such as myself would go and speak with repeat offenders and try to get them to change their ways. I myself was a MAD speaker for a long time, and I started a chapter actually while I was in college in Champaign, Illinois, at the University of Illinois. And it's just great. It's brought that to the forefront, not just drunk driving, but driving under the influence. And now we're throwing in texting and driving, distracted driving, and they do a lot of educational programs for the youth, which is great too.
Wow, that is good. Now, when your accident was, that was before Matt existed.
That's correct.
We all want to know what happened to the driver that hit the car.
No, you don't want to know.
Yes, I do. So what happened? I assume he's locked up in jail.
You would
some
assume
consequences.
that. Well, you would assume that, but you'd be incorrect.
Because it was a repeat offender, right?
He was a repeat offender. He had been stopped and charged with driving under the influence prior to that. He had a method of going from work to the bar and then home. And this time he just wasn't lucky enough to be on the roads by himself, and he ended up killing 3 people. He was convicted of wrong lane usage, and he received a $100 fine.
Wow.
And he did not spend 1 day in jail.
You see, I'm trying to say something right now, and you're just speechless because it changed everybody's life. Now, if I would kill somebody, the pain inside and the remorse and the struggle, I think it would be unbearable for what happened. How did he react? Did he have remorse?
No, he actually saw my grandparents in court, and he never apologized to them. He never apologized to my family. He never sought me out. We lived in a town that was 5 miles from his, and we never heard anything from him, not a letter, not a note, not a phone call. And I know that there are people that knew him at the time, and they just said, you know what, he's a jerk, and he's never gonna say he's sorry, so you need to learn how to deal with that on your own.
Wow, wow.
And that's really tough.
If somebody is really sorry, you can work with that.
Yeah.
But when somebody does that and there's no remorse and changes your entire life for your entire lifetime,
right?
Are you able to forgive him?
That's a really good question. That's what I work on as a Christian. I've worked on that my whole life. I mean, I was raised in the church. I still am. I still raise my children in the church, and I know that God says we need to forgive and forget and get on with it.
I'm not sure forget is part of it.
Well,
forgive is there.
Yeah, forgiveness is what we're supposed to be able to give, and it's been difficult. It's a journey. I should have to say it's a journey for me, and it's something that I struggle with every day. I think if I didn't feel some forgiveness, I wouldn't be able to get up in the morning. So the anger and the revenge and the feelings that you have, I think I've always had to put in the back burner, and I've had to turn my life into something positive to kind of, it's like the evil's here and the goodness is here, and I have to be like this good to take away that evil.
Right.
So.
And God does say forgive, but I also can see that it's extremely hard to do when there's no remorse and it killed everything you loved completely.
Everything I ever
knew.
So
how did you choose to cope then? What was your coping mechanism when you grew up?
Well, somebody told me that my parents were watching me from heaven. And so I always believed that that's what was going on. And so I would try to do really well in school, and I tried to be the best I could, and I didn't drink and smoke and didn't do drugs, and I tried to be the best person I could be. And also because I had to live for 4 people. I mean, my parents, my sister, they didn't really get a chance. And so to this day, I mean, I'm still living for them and myself. So Isn't
that almost like a burden?
I was just thinking a burden, yes. Oh yeah, it was a pretty heavy burden actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're a 13-year-old and you're trying to get straight A's in school and you're trying to be the best.
Perfect.
I tried to be perfect, yes.
Right. So you chose to make a difference and to really help in that by becoming an attorney, a judge.
Right. Well, my grandparents actually were the catalyst there, because they always said that you can prevent this from happening to somebody else. And so that was always my motivation. When I was 5 years old, I knew what I was going to do and what I was going to be. And so, to prevent this from happening to somebody else, I could speak about it. I could be a prosecutor, which was what my first career was. I put drunk drivers behind bars, and it was very satisfying.
Good.
Very satisfying. Oh, yeah, we could talk hours about that. But, and I gave my first speech about what happened to me when I was 16 years old in my high school, and then I continued to this day and speak about it to other people and try to educate.
Wow. So now you're a Christian, you believe in God, you admit your struggles, which I think is beautiful because it's real. It's real where you're at. If there are other people out there or families that just have had the same experience that you had, that a family member died, devastation, possibly, paralyzed, whatever comes out of it, what is it that you want to tell them right now?
Oh, I think that I used to say, why did God let this happen to me? Or why did God let, and I just remember talking and telling people about this, and they would say, it wasn't God that did this, it was the free will of a man.
Right.
And sometimes the free will of man interrupts God's plans, and maybe part of God's plans was to save me. And that's why I've kind of always thought, wow, God and my parents are up there watching me, but I have a purpose. The reason I'm here is because God had a purpose for me, and I have something to give to everybody and to share. And hopefully I can prevent this from happening again.
I even think bigger than that, because I think by you sharing what we talk about in a couple of minutes, what it has done to you, that it will stop other people to make the same mistakes. So I think you're saving thousands of people by just sharing the truth, even as hard as it is. But I want to talk about that in a minute. Don't leave me. And stay tuned. You really want to hear. And yes, I know you're going to get back at me, but about that forgiveness, Barb, is that in the Bible and is that possible? I will tell you. We'll be right back. There are many that have questions, spiritual questions, and would like to have the answers to that. And we have created something for you specifically, barbtv.org, God Questions. Should you be texting or should you be drinking while you're driving? And the answer is, of course, and obvious. And most people will say, just one more time, or just this once, or just do it quickly, or look up a map to see how you have to drive, or start your GPS. Is this smart? Well, when you talk to the people that have really gotten hurt, or actually family members that died because of that, of course it is not. And I want to encourage you to stop now, not tomorrow, not one more time, but stop now. Wendy Reynolds is with me, and she won the award from the U.S. Department of Transportation of the Life Saving Award, and made a difference because she was one of those of that one more time that paid dearly for it. Wendy, could you tell me a little bit, what was that award about?
Well, I've been speaking since I was 16, like I said, but I started this program with 1998, the Every 15 Minutes program. And I go to high schools all over the country, and I speak to the high school students about the dangers of drinking and driving, texting and driving, drinking under the influence of marijuana, drugs. And someone saw me do that one time, and they nominated me. And for the state of California, I went to this national convention in Nashville, Tennessee, and I won the U.S. Department of Transportation Life Saving Award. So it was really a great recognition of everything that I've tried to do and tried to save lives. And I mean, I've spoken in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and hopefully making a difference.
I think hopefully could be removed, because tell me a little bit about that 15-minute program that you have going.
It's a 2-day program where they simulate a DUI collision, and they kill, in quotes, a few students from the class, and then those students end up going to a retreat location after the crash scene, which the whole school will see. They go to a retreat location. They don't have their phones. They don't talk to their parents. It's just as if they have died. I usually will go to that retreat, talk to them about what happened to me. Talked about alternative, safer ways to get home. And the next day we kind of stay the night, and the next day we go and we do a simulated funeral for those children who died the day before. And it's very emotional. It's very life-changing, especially for the students who participate in the program itself, but also for the students in the audience. I mean, I actually had a student in Pittsburgh, California, come out of the audience. There were 2,000 kids in that audience, and one student came down from the audience while I was speaking and hugged me and said, "Thank you so much for coming here." And I'd never had that happen before, and I was totally stunned. But I know that I've changed some lives, and I hopefully will have saved some.
Does it help with your own past?
Well, it's never going to go away.
Right,
the pain's never going to go away. Once they're dead, they're dead.
Yeah.
And my upbringing was always as an orphan. It was always without parents and without a sibling. I never had a sibling. My kids don't have cousins from my side. I mean, we were just talking about that with my son. I said, "How many cousins do you have?" And he said, "But I don't have any cousins from your sister." And I said, "You're right." And so, it affects my children, and it's going to affect my grandchildren. And like I say to the students, there's always going to be those blank spaces in my family tree that weren't supposed to be blank.
Wow, yeah. I could totally
because of
see
that one choice.
Now, you chose to also become an estate planner. Tell me a little bit, is that because what happened to you when there was and there was a huge battle, and did I hear you right, there is still animosity between the families because of what happened so long ago?
Well, I was a prosecutor, which was my first love, putting bad guys behind bars. That was my first love. But once I had my family, I decided I needed to be at home a little bit more. So estate planning kind of came to me. I was praying actually about it and saying, what can I do? Why else am I here? What else can I do to help people? And it just came to me. God gave me the answer, estate planning, because my parents did not have their guardians picked out. They didn't have anything written down to say who I would be raised by if something were to happen to them. So I meet with young families with small children, and I meet with elderly people. I meet with basically anybody who needs their estate plan done, trusts and wills, and hopefully help them in that way.
Right.
And about the animosity, I mean, both sets of my grandparents are gone now, so it's not as bad anymore, and my aunts and uncles still kind of like each other, but when I was growing up, it was pretty bad.
Wow. And so it had a ripple effect. I can see Satan just working hard overtime, not just with the situation itself, but all that came out of it.
I think it actually brought some of my family members closer to God.
Really?
Because they had nowhere else to turn. And that was kind of the way I was. What else am I going to do? I mean, I could turn to drugs and alcohol myself, and I could have just been like, whatever, I can do whatever I want because the world owes me.
Yeah.
But I realized at that point that nothing is owed to anybody. I have to earn it myself. Mm-hmm. And so, the greatest thing that I have now is one of my aunts. One of my aunts on my mom's side is very close to me, and she's kind of stepped in as like a sister role model for me. And my aunt and uncle on my dad's side, who tried for custody of me, have actually become like grandparents to my kids. So in that regard, we have kind of come together as a family and done, piecemealed what we can.
That is awesome. That is awesome, because what went wrong the first round went right the second one.
Yes.
That is terrific. Wendy, if anybody wants to talk to you, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, I have a website. It's wendyreynolds.com.
Okay.
And on there's ways of you can call me, you can email me. On my website, there's ways to contact me. I speak to Rotary clubs, I speak to parent groups, I speak to high schools. I mean, basically, I speak at churches.
You'll go anywhere.
Yes, anybody wants to hear me talk. But I've also, I go to churches and I tell them about the purpose of my life and how God has directed me in the ways that I've become. So,
thank you so much for sharing your horror story that right now is helping thousands of people. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
I want to give you my book, Ransomed.
Oh, great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining the show. And then how do you overcome? How do you forgive when it is so wrong and there is no remorse? How do you move on? And the Bible, of course, has to say things about that, but it's not easy. It is not easy at all. And it says in Isaiah what was done to Jesus and what happened to him and how he had to work through all that. It says he was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, not just for the bad guys, but for the good guys too. And like one from whom men hide their face, he was despised and we did not esteem him. Surely our griefs he himself bore, and our sorrows he carried, yet we ourselves esteemed him stricken, smitten of God and afflicted, but he was pierced through for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The chastening for our well-being fell upon him, and by his scorching we are healed. Hard to imagine, isn't that? All of us like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, trying to cope, trying to live. But the Lord has caused the iniquity of us all to fall on him. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. This is talked about Jesus before he was even there. And of course, now today we know that Jesus went through all of that, not just for me, not just for Wendy, but even for the drunk driver. And then it ends with this, and I think this is core, folks. Yet he himself bore the sin of many and interceded for the transgressors. He interceded. He took the place. So who are we when we choose that we want to be God by not forgiving that person? It's so much easier said than done, and there is so much pain. But if God was able to send Jesus, his son, out of free will, Why can't we do the same? I know there is pain out there, and I know there is huge hurt out there, and it's easier to talk than to do, especially when you're not in someone's shoes. But I do know one thing that does help you to do that. Are you willing, if you're not able to forgive, to start praying for that person on a daily basis? Are you willing to pray blessings over that person's? Not because you feel about it, but because of obedience of God. And I know when you are willing to start praying for the need of that person, even just to say, help them with their needs so they don't go back to drinking, whatever it is. Are you willing to do that so God will change their life, so people will be safe on the road? There are ways around that. It also says in Jeremiah 29, and this is specifically for those that have to move on. For I know the plans that I have for you. God had incredible plans for Wendy, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. How much hope has been brought out of this tragedy to other people? Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. I'm asking you, could you seek God with all your heart? It's easier said than done, but I know if God wants you to do it, He will show you the way in how to get there. And one more. Hebrews 4 verse 15 says, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses. That means Wendy, that means you. But one who has been tempted in all things, as we are yet without sin. Mary, Jesus' mother, saw him die on a cross. Therefore, let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And I believe, and I see, that Wendy is an incredible example for turning a tragedy into a victory to make a difference. You want to talk to us? Oh, please call us, 855-515-5550, or go to our website, barbtv.org. Don't become the prisoner of what has happened to you, but live in the victory instead. Next week, we'll be talking about a complete opposite situation. A man that was drinking too much, that was in San Quentin, that was for 5 years total in jail, and he deserved it. Can God turn around what is bad to good? You want to see this. God loves you, and so do I. Have a great day.